every profession, particularly art and entertainment, have what I would call a pyramid of admiration. A pyramid of admiration. It's a certain hierarchy, right? And take, for example, Luther Vandross or Frank Sinatra. That not only did the public like them, but their peers became fans and would often make a pilgrimage to a Luther Vandross show or a Frank Sinatra show. Other singers, they were singers. Luther Vandross had this. Like peers, people who would never want to admit, that singer's better than me. Sinatra, Luther Vandross. Singers. A pyramid of admiration. We don't see this very often in sports, right? I think the first time I remember it was 1971. Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Madison Square Garden, where the nation stopped. It was not only a mass gathering of the classes in America. It wasn't gender, race, financially separated. Everybody was interested. Everybody was vested. Everybody picked a side. Didn't matter what side it was. I saw something Saturday night in a sport which many of you will never embrace. But to me, it is the new standard for ritual drama, McGregor Diaz. It is our Ali Frazier. Where during the fight and immediately afterwards, peers, other sports stars were in awe, like Ali Frazier, like Luther Vandross, like Sinatra, were in awe of their ability. Best fight I've seen maybe in 20 years. A lot of you don't like UFC. It's too raw. It's too rough. There's too much blood. And I will admit that Nate Diaz's face after the second round looked like Hannibal Lecter's in the ambulance scene on Silence of the Lambs. But I told my son yesterday, he said, Dad, I can't believe you watched that. And I told my son there were a lot of life lessons in that fight. Courage, guts, toughness, passion. If I didn't see the fight, the first two rounds, Conor McGregor destroyed Nate Diaz. Bloodied his face. He had welts on his right leg from kicks. The fight was over. Diaz went down 2 or 3 times, and McGregor, knowing that Diaz is better on the mat, would not go down and pursue him. Just said, get back up. I'm going to knock you out again. Fight was essentially over. In the third round, Nate Diaz summoned something that Joe Frazier and Ali summoned. Both gassed, both shot, both later admitting it's the closest they'd ever come to death while living. And Nate Diaz took the fight over in the third, with virtually nothing in the tank. I know you don't like UFC, some of you. That's a life lesson. It was William Dafoe in Platoon running for the helicopter, falling to his knees. Nothing left. And Conor McGregor suddenly was against the cage and down to his last couple of punches. He grabbed on, held on to the fourth round. From that point on, McGregor had nothing left, was repeatedly staring at the clock. Diaz was drenched in blood. McGregor, because he was embracing him, trying to eat the clock, also drenched in blood. 5 minute, 5 rounds. And the only thing that is close to what I saw Saturday night was the fourth quarter of Game 7 of the NBA Finals. You remember that? You remember the basket by Kyrie and the block by LeBron. But do you remember how bad those teams were for 4 minutes? They were out of energy. And they go deep to the abyss and they pull something out. And I know some of you think UFC is too raw. But there are 4 or 5 things in my life, big businesses that have died. DVDs, newspapers, landline phones. And Saturday night by 9:30 Pacific, boxing died. That was the final nail in the coffin. Boxing's dead. I think this network even has some fights. I hope you watch them, and please patronize our sponsors. But the new ritual drama in America, the trilogy coming, is McGregor Diaz. And I know there's too much blood for a lot of you. And I know some of you would call it gross, vulgar, inhumane. But there were a lot of life lessons there. That was Willem Dafoe. That was Hannibal Lecter. That was manipulation, holding on, cultural war. McGregor was the Ali, the showman, pushing back at authority, Dana White. Ali pushed back at our government. Diaz was Joe Frazier, a working class ethos, a regular guy, toughest guy in the neighborhood. And what I watched was goosebump, riveting, the best fight I've seen in 20 years. The best fight I've seen in 20 years. So great stuff. 877-757-HERD.